to the journeyman. I try to take things that are somewhat complicated and do a little bit of an explainer and make it easier for just everyday people to understand. And seeing that we have a lot, and I mean a lot of economic news coming down the pike this week, I thought it would be helpful if I did this one solo today. I normally have a guest, but in this case, there's I guess the economy is my guest. I'll just kind of take a few minutes just to let folks populate the chat. I see a few familiar faces, some new faces that I'm not familiar with, but welcome. Corinne Johansson, hello, good to see you. Cian Clark, good to see you. Deborah, good to see you. I'll tell you, it's going to be an interesting week, but I think maybe the thing to do, and I'll tell you, it's here's how deep it is. I actually have paperwork. I had to write some of this stuff down because I didn't want my explanations to defeat the purpose, which is to make it understandable. So, hello, Joe. Um, So maybe the best thing to do is just kind of recap where, you know, last week. And I was joking Friday about this time that last Friday we got basically, last Friday was a week long. It was that kind of day. A lot of stuff happened. But the thing that everybody was really watching for was the um, what's commonly known as the unemployment report or the payroll report. On the news, you'll hear it called a jobs report. And it's essentially a survey of kind of where we are. So the expectation was 75,000 to 80,000 jobs, which really, um, if we had hit that number, that's not good. And if you recall the previous month, and we're always looking back. So even though we get the report the first Friday in whatever month, so in this case, Friday, I guess it was the 5th, I think, um, you're really looking at the numbers for the previous month. And to take it a step further, they what they do, and this is statistic stuff, and I'll be honest with you, I did not pass statistics. It's very, very hard. But having spent 2 or 3 decades looking at these numbers in my old job, first as a bond trader, and then the second half of my career was on the other side of the fence, so to speak, as an equity trader. So I've got a pretty good handle on these numbers and the importance and so on. So last Friday, we expected 80,000 ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, and we got 22,000 jobs that were created in the prior month, so in August. What this is always kind of a running thing, so they're always looking back. So you're really always looking at 3 months. You're looking at the month immediately prior. So in September, we're looking at August, and we're also looking at, in this case, July and June. And if you remember, what set Trump off was in July, same thing, terrible numbers. They were better than this. But the revisions, and let me explain revisions, because you got people out here acting like this is some new thing that, Democrats have come up with, or this is the way it works. And you have to understand the way this information is collected initially is surveys that go out to households and private businesses. Okay. And the BLS is literally sending surveys out to, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people. Well, if you've ever gotten an email or, of a survey, you might not fill it out. Okay. Um, And so they know going in that the data is going to kind of be their best guess based on the surveys. And that is why, because it takes people the people who do respond, a lot of them don't respond quickly. Businesses are busy running their business. They're not looking to, take the time to sit down and fill out these surveys. So what happens is that's why they have to do the revisions because, you know, in September, they're estimating August, but they're going to have a better idea of July and June because they've got more data. You've heard the expression data sets. Well, this particular data set is surveys. Okay. Now, it can be good or bad, it can be up or down. Sometimes it's unchanged. I've seen it all three different ways. And sometimes you get really big revisions. I see S Daily says, I've had to do those reports. I was always lagging. I've never had to do one, but I mean that I've seen them 30 years at least. And this is not new. But what these reports can tell you, and I'm not saying they're never right. Sometimes they are, but this is a very inefficient way to collect data. But because the business community, the financial community makes decisions based on this data, they want to get something out to give you an idea of where we're at as soon as possible. You can't wait 3 months to know what happened 3 months ago. So that's what it is. Anyway, so just to kind of recap what happened Friday. Started off with a bad headline number, 22,000 jobs. They revised June, which had already been bad. It had been revised down once. So June got revised down even further to a net loss of 13,000 jobs. That's a negative number. So that means not only did we not create any jobs, we lost jobs. Okay, folks fell out of the workforce for whatever reason. Manufacturing employment. And this to me, I have to say, okay, what's the whole point of these tariffs? To bring manufacturing back to the United States. We lost 12,000 manufacturing jobs last month. For the year, we're down 78,000 manufacturing jobs. Why is that, you might ask? Well, I'm going to take a guess. If you're manufacturing shit, you got to buy stuff like steel, aluminum, right? Well, if you're saying that you want manufacturing jobs to come back to the United States, and at the same time, you're making the things that it takes to manufacture shit more expensive, what do you think is going to happen? This. It. I try not to get too emotional about this, but this whole, I don't even want to call it a policy. It's the most ridiculous, ignorant, and wrong thing. I've seen some stuff, and it's one thing to try something and have it not work, but when everybody is telling you on the front end, like every economist out there was saying, "Hey, if y'all do this, it's going to be bad." Well, here we are. It's bad. Um, I'm from Arkansas. I don't I don't brag on it, but yeah, I'm from Arkansas. So of course I noticed this weekend, or I think it was over the weekend, um, little town in Arkansas, all these farmers descending on Arkansas, talking about, oh my God, we haven't sold anything. Not sales are down, sales are non-existent. I heard a guy talking about soybeans, and for those who don't know, Arkansas may be, and I think it was when I lived there, and it still may be, the biggest producer of soybeans, maybe in the world. Who do you think are their clients? China, soybeans, and rice. If you ever seen Riceland rice in the store, it comes from Stuttgart, Arkansas. That's where Riceland Foods is. So I'm telling you, these guys, there's that harvest time. That's their year. I'm hearing farmers saying we don't have any orders from China. None. In February, I'm going to try to find this. I just remembered this today when they were talking about the situation with the farmers. The head of I think it's the Black Farmers Association. It might be the Black Farmers Union. This guy was all over CNN, MSNBC, begging. This was in February, saying that this is getting ready to be bad. This was before this was before uh, Liberation Day. Just this is a precursor to all these tariffs and all this stupidity. This guy was saying we're we're getting ready to get hung up already. Okay, so not to go too far afield, as they say, but what's happening is, and it's obvious now. You notice nobody got fired. Trump didn't have much to say about this number. Now, also just to drill down a little bit, now, he fired the woman who was the BLS commissioner last month. He nominated a guy named EJ Antoni, who's straight out of the Heritage Foundation and a nut, from what I can tell. I mean, the guy, some of his social media posts, there's some things, even if you think it, maybe you shouldn't write it down. That's a lesson I've learned. Well, these guys don't know about that. They just write down whatever they think, and they think it's never going to come back to haunt them. Well, this guy, um, he's just not really qualified, and I mean, he doesn't have a lot of experience. I think he's only had his PhD for 4 or 5 years. The people in the BLS come up through the ranks, and you're talking about people who've written dozens of peer-reviewed papers. They've given speeches. They've really got some expertise. It's a word we don't use that much anymore. I heard several people were asking me, can we trust the numbers because, you know, Trump's guy is not in here yet. He's got to go through Senate confirmation, which I don't think is normal for this position, but I believe this is something Democrats, maybe something that they dealt for. I don't know how it is that but he's going to have to go through the somebody just said no one in this administration is qualified. And uh, where's the lie? uh, you know, there is one person who's qualified, but he's acting crazy too, and that's the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. I heard this guy on one of the Sunday shows, and he was just asked point blank, are consumers paying the tariffs? Is that true? No. He's lying. He's just lying. I mean, we know this. The person that was interviewing him said, "Well, Goldman Sachs says it is." He's still stuck with it and had some little smart ass comment that, "Oh, Goldman, I used to take their money when I worked." You know, that's not an answer. So even the guy who's smart enough to know better is lying too. So there we are. Um, so what's going to happen? It appears just because of that number, Trump's going to get his rate cut, but he's not going to get it the way he wanted to. They're asking, and they've been just begging. They're not talking about a 25 basis point rate cut. They're talking about 150. So that's like a point and a half or a percentage and a half, a full percentage and a half. That's not going to happen. So when it's going to be a couple of weeks from now, you're probably going to see a 25 basis point rate cut. But the problem is everybody's already when you talk about the market, The stock market, how do I put this? The stock market is a leading indicator, okay, of what market participants see happening in the future. They're looking ahead. Economic numbers, the economy is backward looking. What has already happened? How do we interpret this? What's it telling us? Okay. So the rate cut is already priced in and been that way. Hell, they were thinking we might get 4 rate cuts. Now, based on what happens tomorrow, we might, instead of 25 basis points, we might get 50, a half a point. And I'll explain. So this, y'all follow with me, and I'll try to make this simple. So in March, the BLS does what they call a benchmark revision. So just like I was talking about these monthly revisions, what they're trying to do is take the data that they have, okay, when they have it, and explain what's going on with the economy. So the monthly numbers, as I said, survey based. The benchmark revisions are based on tax data. So think about it. If you ever see, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to confuse it. What they're doing is they're taking payroll based estimates, because if you got the payrolls, you know who's working. Okay. So it is what's called the quarterly census of employment and wages. That's where they're getting that data from. So the March they set a benchmark level in March. And then what they do, as they get more data, they recalibrate it. So what's going to happen tomorrow in September, and they do this every year. Sometimes I think it's in August, but I think it's always in September as of late. They take all this information and they come up with an annual. Okay. Now that I'm just going to read what the smart people say. The preliminary benchmark estimate is released in September, or in the past years, August. And it provides the first look at how much payroll figures may be adjusted for the previous 12 months. The previous numbers are not yet incorporated into the payroll history. In February, so coming up next February, that's when you have what's called the employment situation report that we call the jobs report. Okay. In February, they'll have all the data. And that's when they give you sort of the final revision for the prior year. And they didn't just start doing this. This is where it's always been. Now, we just never had, look, presidents can like not like the numbers and they'll say they don't like it. But we've never had a president to act like the people doing this don't know what they're doing, because they do. And these are people, in a lot of cases, I think the woman he fired, I don't think she's ever worked anywhere else once she got out of college with her PhD. I think she's only ever worked for the BLS. They're not thinking about trying to make Trump look bad. He's doing that all by himself. Okay. So that's what we got coming up. Now, I've written about this. The first time was his first term. And believe it or not, if you go back and look at some of I'm sure I have. I'll put it in when I put this out. I'll try to get it out in 24 hours, just a recording for people who want to go back and listen. But this was during COVID, and we had one of these. Actually, I take it back. It wasn't, but we had an enormous revision. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of jobs. And by the way, this one, it could be like a million job revision, but it's for the year that we're talking about, not just 1 month. At the time, people were saying, "Oh, Trump's messing with the numbers," and I actually defended him. which hurt. But no, I mean, because I try to shoot straight. Look, if the guy does something good in the rare occasion that he does the right thing somewhere, I'm going to give him credit. And I wish he would. I really do. Um, and in that case, I wrote something and said, "Hey, look. First of all, Trump, he ain't trying to work that hard. Okay, this to mess with these numbers, it would be an effort. And I'm going to tell you, um, there would be resignations. You think it's bad now with people leaving? There would be mass resignations if this Antony or Dan, whatever his name is, if he got in there and really started screwing around, it would be a calamity. And not for nothing, even Republicans do not want that. They might not say it, but think about it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, these numbers are all we have to go on. So when you go to the bank and need a loan, how do you think the bank knows what interest rate to charge you, right? How do you think they know how much risk they can take if the numbers aren't real, right? If you've got a 401k and it's, I don't know, in a mutual fund, how do you think T. Rowe Price or any of these investment banks operate? How do you think they write their research if the numbers aren't real? Okay, so but Trump doesn't care. He just wants to look good. And I'm going to tell you the key, the signal that lets you know he knows the economy is bad. There are two. One is what he's doing with all this redistricting. Because if he thought things were getting ready to be really good, like he keeps saying, if he what he said Friday was, well, it's going to be a year. It's going to be a year before you start seeing all this good stuff that I got that's getting ready to happen with these tariffs. Well, a year from now, that's the midterms. If he really believed that, why does he need to change anything? If things are getting ready to really be good, aren't people gonna like vote for Republicans? I mean, so what's up? That's one. Number two, the Federal Reserve has two mandates. These are two things. This is like their prime directive, like in Star Trek or something, right? They got two things. One is watching out for jobs, and two is watching out for inflation. That's all the rest of it. Somebody else got to take care of that. That's why you got a Treasury Secretary and all these other people. So Trump trying to get the Fed to do they're not listening to him. And that's why they have these long terms because we don't want them to listen to whoever's in office. And look, if I'm president, of course you want things to if you could like just kind of put some pressure on somebody and get them to say you're doing a great job. I mean, these guys are politicians. That's the way they think. Nobody as bad as Trump. Okay. And maybe I'll have to do another one of these to just talk about the grift because man, it is so deep. It's mind boggling. Just one little thing, okay? And you may have seen last week they said that Eric and Don Jr. These boys have made $5 billion in the crypto market since Trump's been president. I was just thinking Ivanka and Jared got to be pissed because they didn't make but 85 million when they were in the White House. Okay, think about that, $5 billion at the same time that their dad is in the White House overseeing crypto policy. But we worried about Hunter Biden's laptop. What a joke, right? That's crazy. We worried about the Biden crime family. Yeah, I mean that's so. Anyway, another conversation for another day. So, okay, we've talked about unemployment. Now, that everything that we've discussed, that's coming tomorrow. I want to say at 8:30, I believe. Okay. Um, so that's Tuesday. Wednesday, we have the producer price index. Now, I've talked about this before too. And by the way, if you're not, well, obviously you're on the app if you're seeing this live. Um, if you see the recording, and I usually post this to YouTube as well, so you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which I don't really promote that much, but I think I'm going to start, because it gives people a lot of different ways to access the information. Which, by the way, all my content's free. Um, the things like this, sometimes, I'll make it so that uh, paid subscribers might get it a few days earlier. But in the end, everything's free. So, um, tell your friends, tell folks to subscribe. If they can become paid subscribers, it just helps the cause even more. Now, enough of that for right now. So, um, the producer price index is just what it sounds like. If you think about it, it is it is a measure of producers, wholesale prices. So it's really geared towards how prices are for Walmart for the goods that they're buying. You see? Um, and then Thursday we have the consumer price index. That's the bad boy right there. Okay. So the consumer price index is, again, just what it sounds like. It's looking at consumer prices, year over year, how much they've gone up or down. And by the way, we don't really, when you think about these, we don't really look at what I would call cumulative measures. So we're not necessarily looking at how much prices went up from one month to the next. And the reason is you can get all these wild swings from one month to the next. Um, Thank you, thank you, S Daily. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Um, so the headline CPI, they're expecting to be just under 3%, 2.9%. The They have what they call the core, and I think that is where they take out food and energy. I might be wrong. I'll have to figure that out. But there's something. So food and energy, it just, those numbers can vary a lot from month to month. So when they want to really get an understanding, they kind of take out the more volatile stuff, and that number they're anticipating is going to be over 3%. Now, either way it goes, 2.9, 3.1, whatever, that's almost an entire percentage point above where the Federal Reserve's target for inflation. You're always going to have inflation, okay? Knowing that, the Fed tries to calibrate by raising or lowering interest rates what they view as a healthy, um, growing economy. Okay, so if we're growing at 2% and we're just plugging along at 2%, they're okay with that because they figure, they've kind of got an equilibrium of where we're supposed to be. And the problem that they've got now is because of the tariffs and something that we don't hear talked about as much, all these deportations. They deported over 1 million people I know already, either deported or they're in, detention or something. Well, these people, most of them had jobs. So we've got crops rotting in the fields right now. So we tariffed the hell out of everybody that was our friend. We're tariffing people because this was supposed to be all about making people who've been cheating us and taking advantage of us pay up. We're tariffing, poor little old countries like Vietnam and Thailand. These people, what do we have Thailand is going to buy enough of where it's going to make any kind of difference, right? So this is just silly. But It's like a little kid playing with a nuclear chemistry set or some shit. It's dangerously crazy. And if it was like a James Bond movie, it would be funny, right? I mean, it'd be a good movie. But this is reality. We never thought we'd see this, but this is what's happening. Is we've got people that are, grifting the hell out of us behind closed doors. Some of it's right in front of us, and at the same time, everything they're doing hurts you. I can't think of anything that Trump has done that helps you. So what's what, right? I have a lot of theories about why they're doing this, but none of it really matters because now what's getting ready to happen is this. When he announced all these policies in April, producers started loading up, right? Buying everything they could, trying to get in front of these tariffs. So the stuff we've been buying, they basically what they did was they basically bought everything they're going to try to buy for the year to try to resell it and not have to raise prices. They pretty much gone and okay, and consumers did the same thing. Went out and bought a few more things. Maybe they went ahead and bought Christmas gifts because they know here come the tariffs. And this shit is getting ready to start popping off next month. Tell you what else is going to happen next month. The 150,000 odd people that took the payout, the Doge payout, remember? They offered all these people, okay, you can go ahead and quit and we'll pay you. Well, those people have been on, I don't know what they call it. On Wall Street, we used to call it garden leave, where they're getting paid to stay at home. They're going off the books next month, 150,000 people. Now, that might get offset because at the same time, they're hiring like crazy at Homeland Security, paying off people's student loans, giving them sign-in bonuses. You don't even have to have any experience to get that job. Hey, folks, are you hearing me still? Someone says that they're not hearing. Just give me a like if you can hear me. Okay, okay. So I heard or read rather that Homeland Security got 100,000 applications. So, there may be where those things offset, but they may not line up, perfectly. So you may have you're going to have 150 folks going off the payroll of the government next month. So that's going to show up. Thank you, Lynn. Um, so essentially, I mean, that's all we've got other numbers that are coming out, but that's what everybody's going to be looking at. We got initial jobless claims Thursday. We've got small business optimism index, and that's probably going to be interesting because that's going to tell us business sentiment. But I can tell you what the numbers are saying is this one thing, employment peaked in December of 2024. It's been downhill from there. It didn't go off a cliff really until May. What happened in April? Tariffs. So we're winding down now. There are some layoffs, but people aren't really getting laid off. What's happening is people who have jobs aren't thinking about trying to go somewhere else because they just don't know what's going to happen. Employers, even if they're not firing people, they're not hiring people because they don't know what's going to happen. The wild card in all of this is that we've got a court case, maybe two, saying that tariffs, the whole thing is illegal anyway, despite the fact the government has collected billions of dollars in tariffs, duties, tariff fees, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so that is winding its way through the court system. What's go what's gonna be interesting as hell is if all of this and we get to the Supreme Court and they say, "Well, you know what? You can't do this, Trump. Is the government gonna give that money back?" I mean, because if it's all illegal, right, what they have to return the money. So, there's that, and that impacts all kinds of crazy stuff, which again, somebody remind me, maybe I'll go into it on notes, which by the way, guys, I and gals, ladies, gentlemen, my, use of the word guys is non-gendered, it's everybody, just, FYI. So I write a lot of the things that we're talking about now on notes, and because it's quick and it's quicker than me writing a long form piece. Sometimes it'll end some of the stuff will end up there. But if you really want to keep up with this, and also I say a lot of silly stuff too, because I'm that kind of guy. Um, so yeah, I try to keep it light because there is a lot of bad and potentially bad news. And we're just talking about the economy. We're not even talking about the future of democracy and all of that kind of stuff, right? This is just the result of what people voted for. And God knows everybody tried to tell them. I sure did. I actually wrote I wrote a piece and I and it was, Trump's economic policies are gonna grab you by the wallet because anybody with just a passing knowledge of tariffs knows. Hewley, thanks, man. Hewley Brown says he loves my Zen moments. So I have a quirky kind of sense of humor, and this is a lot of people don't know this. You see this, there's a conception of trading desks where everybody's screaming at each other and cursing, and I mean, don't get me wrong, that happens, but at the same time, some of the silliest stuff you ever want to see or hear that ends up in your feed starts on a New York trading desk. Because you got to think about it. You got guys, women, not as many, but certainly women are on trading desks. And you're sitting there and all you're doing is this. I had six flat screens in front of me all day long. And they're just sort of like, two right here, two over here. And each one of them is on a different market. This one is just news, just scrolling. And maybe I'm on the internet, just on a browser on this one. I'm looking at currencies on this one. And so we're the guys who see the almost everything first. Okay. And so that's kind of where my sense of humor comes from. Just sitting around people under a lot of stress, trying to figure out how to catch a laugh when you can. And so, yeah, that's where the Zen moments come from. So I'll keep them coming. But, just to wrap up, big week. We've had one day of seriously bad numbers Friday. So now what we're trying to do is see if it's starting to look like a trend. And depending on how bad it is, that's going to govern whether we get just a little rate cut, just kind of 25 basis points is not going to change your mortgage really because mortgages are long term. So they're pegged to the 10-year. So this is just going to be kind of the Fed putting a little place mark because, and I should just reiterate this, their other problem is inflation. Remember the two things: jobs, inflation. Well, we know about jobs. So come Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to know more about inflation. And then later in the month, the Fed's going to have their FOMC meeting. And that's when they're going to They're going to talk about it, right? And they're going to say, okay, which thing is the most crucial? My take on where they're at is jobs. They worry about jobs a lot more because the job situation can fall off a cliff so fast they'll be trying to catch up and it'll be too late. So they would, I suspect, they would rather err on the side of caution with jobs and wait and see with the tariffs and whatever and then even if we get like a bad inflation number, it's going to have to be seriously bad for them to not do that 25 basis point cut. So I hope this is helpful. As I said a few minutes ago, I am the epitome of independent media. I am a dude literally on an island, sitting in his kitchen, trying to help some folks. So if this is helpful, by all means, subscribe, tell your friends, repost my stuff that you think, your group of, your network needs to know about. And feel free to ask questions. I try to be pretty accessible in notes. So when people ask, good faith questions, I'm probably going to try to answer if I see it. So with that, I'm gonna let everybody get on with the rest of their evening. I'm gonna go have a glass of wine, and we'll see, we'll see what happens in the morning. And take care, and I will see you on the other side. Bye.